Part 1. Waking. Chapter 1. Because the Nightwings and Rainwings lived in the same rainforest, the new Academy students from both tribes traveled together, making their travel group much larger than the groups of other dragons from the other tribes, especially with the parents of the Nightwing students coming to the mountain to bid their dragonettes farewell for the next few weeks, or in Peacemaker's case, a month. Some of the dragonettes who had been granted the privilege of attending the Jade Academy were dragonettes whom Peacemaker had known for most of his life. Though he would not say he was friends with any of them, acquaintances, yes, but not friends. Peacemaker was one of the lucky 5 Nightwing dragonettes who had scored high on his exit test in the Rainwing Nightwing School that Queen Glory had established in hopes of the next generation of Rainwings and Nightwings becoming closer than their parents and put the negative history between both tribes behind them. Of the 5 Nightwing students, Peacemaker had ranked 4th in his exit exam. According to his mentors, while areas such as sciences and history were not as strong as the mentors hoped, his knowledge of growing fruits and vegetables were the strongest of his class. Strawberries were fruits after all, so Peacemaker felt it only made sense how to grow his own. And because of this, he was qualified for attending the academy. As he flew in the middle of the group of Nightwings and Rainwings alongside his mother, Peacemaker could not help but remember how Queen Glory had personally addressed the group of 10 students and see them off. When the sun had risen, the students had been directed by her messengers to meet the Queen in her pavilion. Once there, they were greeted by Queen Glory sitting on her throne with King Deathbringer to her right. Beside the king were the couple's children, Princess Firefly and Prince Tiger. While 2-year-old Firefly looked like a Rainwing, one could tell she was part Nightwing based on her black and violet scales. Meanwhile, 1-year-old Tiger's scales were a fiery orange with black stripes across his back. Peacemaker had only seen the Queen and her family a few times up close, whenever Hope returned from diplomatic missions. Even though he had always seen the royal family walking around the village and being a part of both tribes' everyday lives, Peacemaker was always captivated with how regal Queen Glory was. She spoke with her subjects with respect, yet was unafraid to use her ever-sharp wit to defuse the situation. "Here we are," Queen Glory had begun, walking in front of the assembled students after she had stood up from her throne. "For 6 years, you have worked hard in school, tolerated boring lessons from your teachers, and spent sleepless nights studying and perfecting your talents." This caused the Queen to pause and smile to herself, and Peacemaker guessed she was thinking of her time with the other, once, Dragonettes of Destiny. Looking back at the Dragonettes, Glory continued, "While your classmates will be taught by mentors who specialize in their favorite talents, the 10 of you will be continuing your growth outside of our kingdom, at Jade Mountain." As she said this, Peacemaker could have sworn he saw some of her green scales change to a bright orange, which he assumed meant she was proud of them. "At Jade Mountain, you will be taught by great teachers and looked after by Sunny, Clay, Starflight, and Tsunami. I wish for nothing but success from all of you. Work hard, stay out of trouble, and bond with your winglet." Queen Glory walked closer to the Dragonettes, pacing in front of each and looking at them with a kind gaze. When she had passed Peacemaker, he could not help but feel a sense of pride grow in his chest as the Queen acknowledged him. "I know that each and every one of you will make our tribes proud," said the Queen after she returned to her throne. With a nod of her head, she concluded, "Because I am proud of each of you." Those words made Peacemaker's heart feel warm for the next few hours as he traveled to Jade Mountain. The Queen was proud of him. Okay, Queen Glory was proud of all the students, but still, she was talking to him as well. It was not often any dragon would hear the Queen say such things to them, at least directly. When the trees of the Rainforest Kingdom began to vanish and the land became steeper and mountainous, Peacemaker knew that, for the first time in his memory, he had left the rainforest that had been his home for most of his life. Now, he had entered Jade Mountain Range to the west. Excitement and nervousness filled his mind just as much as the chill in the air, causing his scales to shake. Beside him, he felt the tips of his mother's wings touch his own. "We're almost there," Hope told him. Peacemaker knew that. The closer the group flew to the dragon jaw-like fountain formation, Peacemaker knew that the school would be even closer. Hope had not bothered asking Peacemaker how he felt, because she knew that the way he was quiet today was all she needed to know about the conflicting feelings of nervousness and excitement. But his mother, ever the greatest mom in the world, did not press him into speaking. Instead, she was just there, in case Peacemaker needed to speak with her. That was one of the many things he had missed about his mother while he attended school, and she would be traveling across the continent, her just being there for him when he needed her most. Distant wing beats drew Peacemaker back to the present, and to realize how the Rainwings and Nightwings had reached their destination before he even saw it. Groups of dragons from different tribes all converged on one area of the mountain, and it was the same place that the Rainwings and Nightwings were headed. The Jade Mountain Academy. Carved out of a section of the mountain range, the school made use of the interior caves. Holes dotted this section of the mountain, used as various entrances and windows for the inhabitants. The academy itself had grown in the past 6 years, according to Moon. With the increase in staff for the academy and the addition of other classes, it only made sense that the school itself would expand further into the mountain. If rumors around the Nightwing Village were true, one of Moon's diplomatic missions to Pantala would involve the discussion of expanding the academy to include students from the western tribes. Following the rest of his classmates, Peacemaker tilted his wings in order to descend towards the ground outside of the academy's main entrance. Once he touched down to the ground, Peacemaker's nervousness and excitement rose in his chest again. He was so close to starting school, literally only a few feet away. New friends, new experiences, new everything. But so many ways to mess up. What if he walked forward and tripped? What if he stepped on his future clawmates' tails? What if he accidentally sneezed, breathed out a flame, and burned an artist's sculpture that was meant for one of the queens? What if that sculpture was secretly a peace offering? What if he started another war? Would he need to change his name to Warmaker? Peacemaker, came Hope's voice, dragging Peacemaker out of his thoughts of ruining someone else's art. You will be fine, she said, wrapping her wings around him in a warm hug, making him smile as he hugged her back. Reluctantly pulling away, his mother looked at him with proud eyes. Remember, be yourself. Smile. Talk with others, he finished, smiling gratefully at his mother. I will, Mom. Hope chuckled softly, leaning forward and pressing her snout to his forehead. I will see you in a month, dear, Hope said. Moon will come by in a few weeks. While Peacemaker still did not like the idea of being away from his mother for so long, the thought he would see his oldest friend regularly made him smile. While Peacemaker had many friends, both Brainwing and Nightwing, Moonwatcher had been the first friend in Peacemaker's memory. She regularly visited Hope and Peacemaker, always willing to play with him, and was the first one to test out his different pie recipes. She had even been present at Peacemaker's hatching, according to Hope, so he knew her for most of his young life, even if he could not remember their first meeting. Looking up at his mother, he nodded happily at her words. Thank you, Mom, Peacemaker said with a confident smile. I'll do well. I'll make you proud. Hope chuckled, kissing his forehead one last time. You don't need to worry about that, Peacemaker, she whispered, because I'm already proud. Edging away from Peacemaker, Hope looked at him one last time for a long moment, turned, and with a flap of her wings, took to the sky and flew away from the mountain. For what felt like an eternity, Peacemaker watched his mother travel towards the kingdom of mud and vanish from sight. Looking all around him, his parents bid their dragonets farewell, taking to the sky. Some dragonets waved goodbye with their wings for their parents, some went inside the entrance cave. With a deep breath, Peacemaker followed suit and entered the academy. Give it a nice little buffer. The entrance cave was already filled with dragons. Some were adults, while most of the dragonets were students. Within the dimly lit cave, many dragonets were walking towards different tables, picking up scrolls of information about their winglet placements and their daily schedules. Tapping a talon on the ground, Peacemaker looked at the different tables set around the cave. Noticing one table that was not as crowded compared to the others, he decided to sit there. The dragon operating the table was a blue-green sea-winged dragon, probably the oldest dragon in the cave. He was handing out scrolls to the students in line, each dragonet looking eagerly at them. Once Peacemaker was third in line to receive a scroll, he looked at a sign on the table that read, Winglet Placements. Moment of truth, Peacemaker thought as the dragon ahead of him, a dark red skywing who carried himself with pride, almost like he was royalty. Maybe he was, but Peacemaker doubted he would be in the same winglet as a royal. Stepping forward to receive his scroll, the Sea-Wing looked up at Peacemaker with a bored expression, but dutifully handed him a scroll. Thank you, Peacemaker said, nodding his head at the Sea-Wing. Are you a teacher? Yes, the Sea-Wing answered, raising a scaly brow at the Nightwing-Rainwing hybrid as if he were not expecting such a question. My name is Webbs, the history teacher. Oh, Peacemaker answered, briefly deflating at the mention of history. It was not his least favorite topic, but he was not very strong at it. But Peacemaker corrected his attitude. Maybe Webbs was a good teacher. Well, I can't wait for your class, he added. Webbs nodded before gesturing Peacemaker to move as the Mudwing behind him was waiting for his scroll. Stepping off to the side, away from the table, Peacemaker sat on the ground to unravel his scroll. Peacemaker quietly read its contents. Welcome to the Jade Mountain Academy. With that opening sentence, Peacemaker could not help but feel welcomed. After reading through the introductory paragraphs that told the reader what they would be learning at the academy, Peacemaker's eyes fell upon the desired contents of the scroll, the winglet placements. Before reading, Peacemaker took a deep breath. Here we go. Time to find out who my kilometers will be for the next 4 years. Jade Winglet, Icewing, Stoat, Mudwing, Mangrove, Nightwing, Darkclaw, Rainwing, Python, Sandwing, Jackal, Seawing, Wave, Skywing, Shrike. Well, Peacemaker had to admit, he was a little disappointed. Moon had been in the Jade Winglet during her years at the Academy along with Kikiju and Kablee. It would have been nice to see the reaction if he had been placed in Jade. Oh well, maybe he was in the Gold Winglet. Gold Winglet, Icewing, Snowstorm, Mudwing, Heron, Nightwing, Sharptooth, Rainwing, Monsoon, Sandwing, Cactus, Seawing, Otter, Skywing, Storm. Well, Silver was still nice. Silver Winglet, Icewing, Caribou, Mudwing, Beaver, Nightwing, Strongwings, Rainwing, Binturong, Sandwing, Mongoose, Seawing, Gull, Skywing, Falcon. Copper. Well, Peacemaker knew one of the Nightwings, Shade Hunter, had a father who was a blacksmith and could make some pretty metal artwork with copper. Copper Winglet, Icewing, Aurora, Mudwing, Russet, Nightwing, Shade Hunter. How ironic. Rainwing, Glorious, Sandwing, Scorpion, Seawing, Mako, Skywing, Canyon. Well, at least knew Shade Hunter was in a winglet whose name fit her father's craft. But what about him? Peacemaker was starting to wonder if he had not even been accepted into the academy. What if he was in someone else's place? Taking a gulp, Peacemaker continued to read the quartz placement. Quartz Winglet, Icewing, Ermine, Mudwing, Alligator, Nightwing, Peacemaker, 3 moons, thank you, Rainwing, Jaguar, Sandwing, Hyena, Seawing, Tempest, Skywing, Cliff. Note: Ermine has 1 asterisk, and Tempest has 2 asterisks. See end of chapter. Relief washed over Peacemaker. Thank goodness he was not in someone else's place. While he may not have been in Jade Winglet, he was still in one. And, if you might add, quartz was a pretty stone, so surely was not that bad. What? Why is my name at the bottom of the list? Came a yell from the Skywing close by, the dark red one who had been in front of him. His wings opened wide, their orange membranes almost looked like fire for a moment. Turning around and storming past Peacemaker, the dragon had stomped up to Webbs, holding up the scroll to the instructor, who was clearly not in the mood with discussing winglet placements based on his bored expression. Seriously? The Skywing snapped. Why was I placed in the bottommost winglet, and at the literal bottom of the scroll? Peacemaker glanced at the name at the bottom of the scroll and noticed the name Cliff written in the place of the Skywing member of the quartz winglet. Wait. Cliff. Wasn't there a notable Skywing named Cliff? Somehow related to Queen Ruby? Oh yeah. Prince Cliff. I'm in the same winglet as the Skywing Prince, Peacemaker thought, both surprised and honored. But it seemed Webbs did not feel honored about the prince complaining in his face. I'm just saying, it is a little odd that my name is at the bottom of the list. Shouldn't it be a little higher? Maybe in the gold winglet? Cliff said to Webbs as Peacemaker got closer. Look, Cliff, I did not decide where to place you. I am just handing the scrolls out, Webbs repeated, which he looked tired of doing. Again, speak with Tsunami about it. Feeling an obligation while helping his clawmate down, Peacemaker took a deep breath and walked over. It can't be all bad, Peacemaker said, interrupting Cliff's rebuttal to Webbs. The latter looked almost relieved as the Nightwing-Rainwing hybrid approached. Quartz is a pretty stone. Cliff's attention turned to Peacemaker, raising a brow as the prince's almost golden eyes looked into his. The prince glanced at a scroll, no doubt looking for Peacemaker's name. Peacemaker, right? Cliff said, and a familiarity in his voice as he said the name. Peacemaker nodded, giving a friendly smile. We're in the same winglet, he said with a nod at the prince. Well then, it is a pleasure to meet you, the prince replied. But then he frowned again. Peacemaker suspected he remembered the topic of discussion again. And sure, quartz is pretty, but not as precious as gold. And as a prince, it's embarrassing that I am at the very bottom of the list. I don't think any of the founders meant any disrespect by it, Peacemaker assured his clawmate. Yeah, but... Excuse me, you two! Webb's voice interrupted the two dragonettes. Both looked at the instructor as he looked back with barely contained annoyance. But there are students waiting their turn! Glancing to his side, sure enough, Peacemaker saw a line of dragonettes glaring at him and Cliff, as they held up the line of at least 6 dragonettes. Smiling sheepishly, Peacemaker backed away from the table, Cliff following his lead, allowing the students to come forward to get their placement sheets. I still think I should be in a higher winglet, Cliff continued. I think you should too, especially with your stars. Huh? Peacemaker asked, glancing at his back wings whose membranes were dotted in a rainbow of glowing stars-like spots, as opposed to the white dots other Nightwings had, courtesy of his long-deceased Rainwing father. Oh, well, I don't mind being in Quartz Winglet. I mean, it is just a name. Yes, but we are at the bottom of the list, Cliff said, again going back to his original argument. The conversation continued as the two made their way to the different tables to receive information about their schedules and a map to help them find their way across the school. Despite the circular discussion, Peacemaker found it easy to speak to Cliff. He was stubborn, not spoiled. The conversation about winglets and placements on lists continued as the two followed a map to their winglet's common cave, where they would unpack and rest up for the evening, gathering in the Prey Center, where the academy founders and teachers would address the students at dinner. The Quartz Winglet's common cave was circular in shape. In the center of the cave was a fire pit, with 7 cushions circled a safe distance. Along the walls were storage containers and bookshelves, all for the winglet's personal use. The cave was also connected to 3 smaller caves, where the winglet, Peacemaker correctly assumed, would sleep. Being the first to arrive, the two decided to unpack in one of the sleeping caves and choose the center one, which was Cliff's suggestion, but Peacemaker was fine with the idea since no one else had chosen it. I'm just saying, being placed at the very bottom of the student roster is hardly a respectable place for Skywing royalty, Cliff said, trying to defend his complaints about his placement in the Quartz Winglet for the 50th time as he steps inside the cave. They probably weren't thinking about you being a prince, Peacemaker suggested, trying to help his clawmate, except that he was virtually stuck in the Quartz Winglet, also for the 50th time. I mean, I'm sure you're still respected. Cliff shook his head as he slid the carrying bag off his neck and proceeded to throw it on one of the 3 sleeping areas, only for a loud shout of protest to originate from said sleeping platform, causing both dragonettes to jump in surprise as a yellow-scaled Rainwing with black spots across his body suddenly decamouflaged and sent Cliff's bag and scrolls flying off of him. Hey, watch where you're going, said the Rainwing, shaking his wings and glaring at Cliff, black furrows around his neck briefly flaring up. Didn't you see me taking a nap there, Skywing? Cliff and Peacemaker, recovering from their shock, glanced at one another, each wondering if the other had seen the Rainwing on the bed. Peacemaker shook his head at Cliff. He was certain the Rainwing had been camouflaged, causing the prince to look back at the Rainwing. Well, maybe you shouldn't sleep while invisible, the Skywing prince countered, annoyed at the Rainwing's words. He means sorry, Peacemaker offered, not wanting his 2 clawmates to argue literally only a half an hour after arriving to the school. He should be, snapped the Rainwing in an irritated manner. Who do you think you are, the prince of the Skywing Kingdom? He sneered at Cliff, not knowing the irony. Peacemaker glanced at Cliff, whose face brightened confidently. Funny story, Peacemaker says, but pauses as the Rainwing looked back at Cliff, the latter giving a confident smirk as he saw the Rainwing connect the dots. The Rainwing frowned deeply before it clicked, and he blinked in surprise. Oh! He exclaimed, staring at Cliff. And just when it looked like to Peacemaker the Rainwing was going to apologize, I'm still not apologizing, though, he said dryly, laying back down on the bed, and you're not getting this bed. Cliff, briefly taken aback, quickly recomposed himself from the sudden change of events and picked up his bag and scrolls. That's fine, Cliff answers, unyielding, as he places his things on a different bed on the opposite side of the corner. I wasn't interested in that bed anyways, and this one suits me. Though Peacemaker could tell, Cliff actually still wanted the bed the Rainwing was on, but wanted to appear like that bed was too lowly for him. The Rainwing scoffed. Sure you are, he replied, stretching himself before looking at the two more closely. Either way, the name's Jaguar, he introduced himself. Now, unless Queen Ruby got another dragonette, I'm guessing you must be Cliff and... He paused as he looked at Peacemaker, both dragonettes remembering each other from the rainforest, whom Peacemaker could say he remembered Jaguar a little. Peacemaker, wasn't it? Jaguar said, which Peacemaker nodded at the question. Yeah, he answered, finally remembering where he had seen Jaguar. We were in Tamarin's botany class in the primary school, I think. From what Peacemaker vaguely remembered of Jaguar, he was an assertive dragonette who was surprisingly loud for a Rainwing. When some Nightwing dragonettes called Rainwings lazy at school, it was normally Jaguar who started fights with him. But despite this, Peacemaker remembered Jaguar as a hard and reliable worker. It only made sense he gained the privilege to attend the academy. I vaguely remember that, yeah, Jaguar said, visibly thinking back to the class. Weren't you the one who kept asking questions about strawberries? He asked, frowning. No doubt remembering how Peacemaker's questions were sometimes, always, related to the best way to grow strawberries. Not my fault that I love strawberries. They're the best fruit. The one and only, he answered with a friendly smile. I can't grow other things, Peacemaker added, but strawberries are just my thing. The hybrid patted his traveling bag. One pocket had strawberries in it. Hope there's a place I can plant these. It would be a shame if there was not a place to grow them. The academy has some fertile growing spots, came a new voice from the entrance of the sleeping cave. The three dragonettes looked to see a Seawing about their age walk in, with her scales of light blue and aqua-green wing membranes and eyes. Peacemaker couldn't deny she looked pretty. Her calm gaze and demeanor also relieved Peacemaker. And maybe not all of his clawmates would bicker? You must be Hurricane, right? Cliff asked, the first to recover from the appearance of the new arrival. Tempest, she corrected, though with a sincere smile and a nod of her head in greeting. Before Peacemaker could introduce himself, Tempest was already speaking. Perhaps we could have introductions in there, Tempest asked as she pointed her tail out to the common cave. Peacemaker could just barely see someone sitting on a cushion reading a scroll. Peacemaker, along with Cliff and Jaguar, nodded as the three followed Tempest outside to where the other dragonette was sitting. The dragonette in question was an Icewing. Though her scales were completely white, her tail spikes were dark blue, which Peacemaker thought was odd since he had always heard Icewings were always white. A necklace with sapphires hung around her neck while a ring, also embedded with a sapphire, was on her horn. As the rest of the winglet approached her, the dragonette looked up from her scroll and at Cliff, Jaguar, and, finally, Peacemaker, though he noticed her gaze on him was much longer. The name's Ermine, she said after a short while before diving intently back into her scroll. With a sigh, Tempest sat on a cushion beside Ermine, implying both dragonettes knew one another. As Peacemaker sat across from the three, Peacemaker noticed Cliff and Jaguar glance at the other, clearly waiting for the other to take their seat in some kind of silent contest. Eventually, it was the Skywing Prince who sat down beside Peacemaker, while Jaguar sat beside Tempest. The 5 members of the Quartz Winglet sat in silence. Only the slithering of tails, clicking of claws on the ground, and talking in the distance could be heard. But silence filled the gap between the new winglet. Peacemaker decided to break the ice. He bit his tongue while saying that out loud. Took out a pouch and pulled out 4 strawberries. But instead of the fruits being red, they were covered in a brown coating. What are those? Cliff asked, cautiously, not sure what to make of what Peacemaker was presenting. Strawberries, Peacemaker answered bluntly, covered in chocolate. Pardon? Cliff asked with a scaly eyebrow raised. Clearly, he had never heard of the substance before. From cacao plants in the rainforest, Peacemaker answered as he handed out each clawmate a strawberry. Cacao plants are normally really bitter, but our tribes know how to make them sweet. Once Tempest, Jaguar, and Cliff got a strawberry, Peacemaker got up and approached Ermine, who was still reading her scroll. I just figured I'd bring something for us to snack on while we got to know each other, he added as he stood in front of Ermine. Peacemaker held out a strawberry for Ermine, who still had not noticed him in front of her. In order to pull her out of the scroll, Tempest gently nudged Ermine's wing with her own, causing Ermine to look at Tempest with a raised eyebrow, but then saw Peacemaker, who smiled friendly at her while still offering the strawberry. Ermine looked at the strawberry and after a moment of hesitation, decided to take it. Well, thank you. What was your name again? She asked while taking a bite from the strawberry, and she blinked in pleasant surprise, which Peacemaker assumed meant she liked it. Peacemaker, he answered, smiling, pleased his classmates enjoyed what he made. My name's Jaguar, the Rainwing student said, introducing himself to both Tempest and Ermine. Cliff finished his strawberry, admitting it was good. Prince Cliff. The Skywing introduced himself. Turning his attention to Ermine's scroll, he asked, "What are you reading?" Oh, just a scroll about Icewing history," Ermine responded, her tone changing ever so slightly. "In particular, how the circles came to be," continued Ermine, frowning slightly at the mention of the circles, "and how they developed over the years, and the effect it had on the non-aristocratic Icewings," she explained. Peacemaker, Cliff, and Jaguar glanced at one another. Peacemaker found this interesting, to say the least. He'd always learned at school that it was rare for an Icewing to actually think outside of the circles. "That is kind of weird," Cliff answered bluntly, voicing the three thoughts out loud. "I mean, you clearly look to be in the aristocracy." "Ermine is from the circles, though she's much more open in her opinions about it," Tempest explained, answering for Ermine. "At the quarterly summits the queens attend at Sanctuary, let's just say she caused some Icewing spikes to rattle," Tempest added, clearly poking fun at her friend good-naturedly. Ermine rolled her eyes at Tempest. "Ha ha! Icewing puns! Hilarious and original! What's next? Coming up with the cool and the cold jokes?" asked the Icewing, clearly sarcastic, but Peacemaker noticed there was no mean spite in her tone at Tempest. "So you're like, what, against the circles?" asked Jaguar, frowning. "Not necessarily," Ermine added. "A hierarchy or chain of command is certainly needed. I'm not an anarchist or anything, but, in practice, the systems of the circles are flawed and dated. It doesn't have to go away, but it does need to change," she explained. "Willing to change traditions, but keep some things in place," Cliff thought out loud. "I think you would like my mother." And, if Peacemaker were honest, he liked Ermine too. He had heard bad things about the aristocracy from Moon and Kibley over the years. Apparently they had a friend from their winglet, an Icewing prince, who was once part of the circles. But even after doing so much to prove himself, he was still in exile from the Icewing tribe. But Ermine was from the aristocracy, yet she did not like how it operated. He wondered what kind of system she would include if she were in control of it. Ermine nodded in agreement at Cliff's statement. "I've read scrolls about Queen Ruby and how she reformed the Skywing Kingdom. Ruby is one of the good queens that have recently ascended to the throne. Moorhead has always been decent, but real change came in the form of Glory and Thorn. They're much better than Coral and Snowfall," she said, turning to Tempest. "No offense about Coral, of course." The Seawing shrugged her wings. "I live in the Kingdom of the Sea, but I cannot say I have much emotional connection there." "What do you mean?" Peacemaker asked, confused. "How can you live somewhere but not love it?" "I have done a lot of traveling for most of my life," Tempest explained. "While I am loyal to the tribe, I wouldn't say I bleed for the Queen." Now that was a thought Peacemaker had a hard time understanding. Being ruled by a queen who you didn't like? Peacemaker had heard things about Queen Coral, but at the same time his mother told him that complaints about Coral by Seawings were rare. Though if rumors were true, Coral may not have been queen for much longer. A silence fell on the group yet again, and this time it was Tempest that tried to break the silence. "Has anyone seen the Sandwing and Mudwing who are supposed to be in our winglet?" she asked. Jaguar was about to answer Tempest, when sounds of screams and shoving came just outside of their cave. The five, startled, looked out their cave entrance. Sure enough, a large Mudwing and a female Seawing came in sight, the former dragging a Sandwing around the winglet's edge. With them, a large and bulky Mudwing with glasses timidly followed them, his eyes on the ground, trying his hardest not to get noticed. "This is Scavenger Doug, Tsunami! I've been framed! I swear I didn't do it!" screamed the Sandwing, struggling against the teachers, who Peacemaker just now realized were two of the 5 Dragonets of Destiny. Despite the Sandwing's resistance, Clay's grip remained firm, calm, and very unbreakable as he guided the Sandwing through the tunnels, no doubt to Tsunami's office. "Hyena, please," Clay said calmly, trying to convince her to cease her struggles. "You were in the middle of the entrance cave. We saw you looking at the chalice even before Alligator came over to try and distract us," Tsunami said, not bothering to hide her annoyance with the students' protests. "Well, you saw wrong!" snapped the Sandwing, apparently known as Hyena. "Like I said, I was framed!" But then a chalice and some other smaller items fell out of the pouch. "Like I said, I was framed!" But then a chalice and some other smaller items fell out of the pouch slung over her neck, which dropped on the floor with a loud, clattering noise. Hyena blinked in surprise, and her protest ceased, looking at the treasure, then back at the teachers, back at the treasure, and then back to the teachers. "That's not mine!" Peacemaker believed her, but not in the way she probably hoped. Clay and Tsunami most likely had the same thoughts as they looked up from the trinkets in the chalice and back to Hyena. Clay sighed, shaking his head, while Tsunami raised a brow sternly. Well, clearly Clay and I saw wrong, Tsunami muttered sarcastically, which Peacemaker had to note was not as epic as Queen Glory's wit. Tsunami's gaze suddenly turned on the Mudwing, who smiled nervously at the head of the school. Don't even get me started on you, Alligator! The Mudwing, Alligator, winced. It looked like he hoped to have blended into the background, which Peacemaker knew was difficult as he was quite big and bulky. Adjusting his glasses, Alligator looked nervously at Tsunami. But Hyena told me to do it, he protested, which Peacemaker could tell was true just by the way he held himself. Hey, I did no such thing, snorted Hyena, just as she ever so slowly reached for the golden chalice that had fallen from her bag. Tsunami glared pointedly at both, but quickly noticed Hyena reaching for the chalice. Give me that! Tsunami snapped as she snatched the chalice off the ground. The headmistress and Clay continued to guide Hyena to the former's office. All the while, Alligator glanced at the quartz winglet cave with an embarrassed expression as he followed. When they were gone, Peacemaker looked at his clawmates. Cliff and Jaguar looked rather amused at the sight that unfolded. Tempest shook her head, though she was struggling to hide an amused smile as well. Ermine, on the other hand, had her talons over her eyes, exasperated at what had unfolded. Were those our clawmates? Peacemaker asked. Cliff, not holding back his amused grin, said, I think they were. I like the Sandwing, said Jaguar, smirking. I like her style. Not sure what to make of the Mudwing, though. Seems like a bit of a wuss, he said with a shrug. Ermine, meanwhile, removed her talons from her eyes to stare at the leaving dragons, only to then quickly dive into her scroll again. Nope. Not going to get involved. Peacemaker and Tempest glanced at each other, both chuckling at their clawmates' reactions. Something deep down told Peacemaker that this was going to be an interesting 4 years. Asterisk 1. In the second arc, there was an Icewing named Ermine in the Quartz Winglet. The Ermine in this story is not the same character from the Jade Mountain arc. Asterisk 2. For the fans who read the Winglet Assassin, Tempest is not the same character from said short story. The similarities in names are purely coincidental.